Speaking first is the Prime Minister. If you would like to introduce yourself and use your pronouns, give us your pronouns, please. That would be great.
Cormac, he. I forgot to do this. He, they. Yeah, that's the one.
Mm-hmm.
And I am the president.
Okay. Speaking second, leader of the opposition.
Joshua, no preference, events officer and schools officer.
Speaking third, the deputy prime minister.
Balint, he or they, vice president.
Speaking fourth, deputy leader of the opposition.
Jasmine, she, her, novice training officer.
Speaking fifth, opposition whip.
Olivia, she, they, and I am the Thursday competitive training officer.
And speaking sixth and last is the government whip.
Mia, she, her, and I'm one of the social secretaries.
Cool. Right. If everybody can see in the chat, I will be posting 1 minute, 6 minutes, 7 minutes. You guys know how protected time works. Do I need to explain that? Do I need to explain that?
We get that.
Just
Okay.
a quick reminder before the whip speeches, there's questions from the audience if people want to ask questions. Georgia should probably try and keep it balanced with questions to each side. But yeah, think of questions you can ask and try and stump our whips.
But when the time comes for it, Georgia will invite you to do so.
Yes, probably. Without further ado, I would like to welcome up the Prime Minister to begin this debate. Here.
Thank you, Ben. Am I audible? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet. Right. Where are we? Do you gonna like screen share the timer or what?
No, because it's on my phone. I'm gonna put it in the chat.
Just a question, POI
Just needs to
goes
get a
into
timer
the
up
chat,
online, then.
or should we just wave? I know it's Cormac speaking, but for next round.
POI's in the chat, yeah? Yeah.
So we just say POI in the chat. Yes? We just
Yeah.
type POI. Cool. We ready? Yes? Guessing so.
Yeah.
All right, so as you've already heard, we define a catch-all party as a party that aims to include a vast number of ideologies or ideas by putting them all under one party and like a sort of umbrella. Examples of which would be, the two major parties in the UK, the Conservative and Labour parties, the Democrat Party in the US, and many Christian Democrat parties in Europe. Although this debate is taking part in Western liberal democracies, any sort of terminology that I use, say if it's specified to the UK, I do mean it in general. If I start saying MPs, know that I'm meaning to say representatives. If I start saying parliament, I mean like government. So first of all, we'd like to start by saying is that the idea of these catch-all parties being ended, we believe that means they will get into power some way or another. We think that if we start debating on whether they will get into power or not, means that we are not having a debate on ending catch-all parties. We're having a debate on, like a system of voting, like a first past the post voting, and we believe that's just not part of the debate. So we believe that the world that we present to you will end catch-all parties and then go on to have multiple specialist parties that are in power. And we think that's a fair assumption to make. Otherwise, we're having a debate about the political system we're in rather than the actual state of the parties that we have. Okay, yeah. So like I said, we think that like in a world where there's no catch-all parties and instead there is like multiple specialist parties, you think that then we have a multi-party system that is like viewed in like many Western liberal democracies across the world, where many of areas of the political dichotomy are represented. So for instance, you might have like a socialist workers party, you might have a centre-left party, you might have a environmental green party, things like that. Like, so it's more like specified areas of the left wing, the right wing, and some parties that are like more focused on certain issues, such as like certain broad issues, such as like environmentalism, stuff like that. Okay, so for instance, like if we were to have it in the UK, the Labour Party would be split along the sort of more hard left and opposed to the like centre left, that like the Blairites, as opposed to like Momentum, stuff like that. Okay, so yeah, so the world looks like that, and we think that the most significant change that comes about with having this multi-party system and having these multiple specialist parties is that we have a significant change with how bills are passed, and we think that is one of the biggest like things that changed, and one of the things that changed the system the most. So like the problem that we see with catch-all parties right now, and we think it's a massive flaw, well, two massive flaws, is that like one, in with this ideological like schism within the parties, that bills that are trying to get through to that party will just be either watered down or completely shut down before they even reach the the legitimate part of government, which is the scrutinization and the debate that goes into putting forward a bill. We think that if there's schisms within the party, we don't get to see that. There's no transparency there. We don't get to see the areas where that happens, or we get like a watered down version of the bill. So we think that like it's decided within the party, which isn't something we would have voted for. This is something that like that happens because there's like these massive schisms. Secondly, we think that when there is bills that follow the ideological lines that the party want it to, we think that the party, the unelected like sort of bureaucracy of the party, can force the hand of many MPs using whips. And we think that one of the biggest problems in Western politics today is the thing with whips. So like why are whips a problem? Why is it the problem like you can like whip parties into shape and make them vote a certain way? Because we think the parties, one of the other biggest problems with Western liberal democracy parties is they can be massively influenced by lobbyists, which the lobbyists are often included in their influence due to the amount of money they have. So we think that basically the bills are basically being decided by the lobbyists. For instance, like the Brexit bill, even though there was massive like ideological lines being drawn in the party, they using like resignations, using like firing people, they managed to just push it past anyway without any sort of like legitimization. They just basically got rid of all the ones that disagreed, and they just they just kept going on with it. And we think that's just like a wrong thing that happened. So yeah, the whips are the ones that make the decision making. What's it look like in our world where there's like no more big parties? So we think that the diversity in ideologies and like the sort of the blocks that exist as parties rather than as groups in that party means that we get to see the level of debate, because these parties are already agreeing on a bill before they put it forward. So we get to see the level of debate that these parties have, the level of scrutiny that these parties have in the public arena, that is the government or parliament or wherever it is. So we don't get those watered down things. And we also believe that the power of lobbyists, the power of party whips, the power of these unelected, undemocratic bureaucracies that are the parties in the West, because the people who make the decisions aren't actually elected officials, are the ones who promote the leaders, are the ones who decide on who gets to be the MP where, they're the ones who decide what the whip does. We think that doesn't happen as much in our world, because one, lobbyists are like all over the place because they can't choose one party to go for, because they have like that one party has a certain ideological route and they can't sway them from that ideological route. And secondly, that there's way too many of them to be able to control in one go. So we think that the abilities of lobbying and elites that control the like sort of political bureaucracies is massively downplayed, which means the abilities of the people to influence change within Parliament is massively like upplayed. I'll go on to a more short point. So basically that increases legitimacy, democracy, representation, all of those things, and scrutiny on bills, because those parties get to put it out onto the floor as opposed to getting to put it at these like closed door decision makings when bills are being decided. So we get to see that there's transparency within this government, and then there's democracy, because the elected officials are the ones making the decisions, not the whips, not the unelected bureaucracies. I'm going to first... No, I can't. I don't have enough time for that. So yeah, overall, the abilities of MPs are massively increased because there's less impacts of lobbying, there's less impacts of whips, there's less impacts of bureaucracies because of these shorter specialist parties, which means that people are greatly like represented in Parliament. Okay, yeah, done.
I would like to thank the Prime Minister for a wonderful speech and welcome up the Leader of the Opposition. Hear, hear.
Am I audible?
A little quiet.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, you're going to hear me through the wall, darling.
Yeah, I know.
3, 2, 1. We don't entirely agree with Cormac's view that this debate is about, oh, we assume they'll get into office. I mean, there's proportional systems in Germany, Poland, and France, except the Green MPs still never get in, the far left still never get in. Just because you have a proportional system does not mean you necessarily get into power. But even if you say, oh, they will get elected, doesn't mean they're going to get into government and anything. We believe that those people who have a moral good, who actually are projecting something moral, are more dismissed if they're actually elected, but in a different party, than if they are within that party actually being able to create change. So yes, we think, frankly, you know, if the Conservative Party can disregard that one Brexit MP because he's the opposition, we don't like him, sort of. But if he's actually in the party, he has a party influence, we think that's going to. If you believe these people should have influence, they must be in the same party system. Bills are passed differently. They're just less likely to pass. They're going to get through, and you're going to have more parties, more checks and balances, more issues with that. So that is just not going to happen. I mean, his last thing saying, even if they're elected and not in government, they're still going to have influence. They're going to have this ability to pass bills. They're going to have this influence. How much influence do the Lib Dems have? Because as far as I'm concerned, the Lib Dems have very little influence. So we don't think where this point is true. Now, let me go on to my speech. The electorate failed. The electorate have failed time and time again to actually elect the people we need. They've failed to elect Green MPs. They have failed to elect MPs to represent minorities. They have failed in all things that count. Because for the electorate, because they have failed to elect morally, they have failed to elect those that we need, because just because you are moral does not mean you are popular. There is no position which Cormac can say, well, if we create small parties, they're going to get in. That's not how the electorate works. In Germany, the electorate elect the Christian Democratic Party. Again, a very bland centrist party, don't really stand for anything. The same in Poland, and no one is electing people who are going to stand up for LGBT people in Poland because they don't care. The electorate does not guarantee morality. So at the point where we cannot trust the electoral system to guarantee morality, we must look for it elsewhere. We believe that having small groups advocating for something can make a real difference. Look at the MPs who are in favour of the climate when David Cameron was in power. Look at the Jewish Labour's momentum. They can actually really put in influence. No, thank you. Here is the thing. We do not believe the electors are ever going to put these people, these moral leaders, into power. So we must secure it in a different way. As much as we love democracy, we need democracy that can actually stand up and actually have real experts, really represent people, and not just stand with a populist bubble. So that is by securing by securing morality through the moral system, then we must do it. We have to secure that morality. We have to secure voices, and we have to prevent radicalization. This just doesn't work in first past the post. You're still going to have the same centrist parties win, and it also doesn't work in proportional systems because those people get pushed to the side and the electorate will still vote for them. And frankly, he can say, well, we want more people challenging Angela Merkel in the German assembly. No thank you to the POI. But we'd rather have people in the party system shaping Angela Merkel's policies, rather have people shaping the platform or choosing a new leader than actually just being able to decide. If you're standing up in parliament as the government and some opposition stands up, you can just say, oh, he's the opposition, sort him. We don't care about him. But if we're going to and this doesn't work because we can actually disregard him, and that is better. We must secure this morality, and then we must secure voices. The fact is, these people aren't, these minorities who care about the environment, who care about minority groups, these people aren't going to get elected under this system. So we have to actually give them a voice in the party system. We have to have someone standing up in the Labour Party and telling the centrist party or a late party in government actually give a fuck about these people. So we have to secure those voices. We think with discourse within a party system, a leader is going to be more reactionary to people in his own party because he has to be, because they can actually control his job, than some weird off party with 5 MPs who no one really cares about. If we want these voices to be secured, these moral voices, then they should be in a position where they can challenge authority, challenge these positions. I will take you at 5 minutes, Cormac. Then we have to be able to give them a platform in the party system. So we have to secure these voices. And here's the other thing. In this system, his idea that we're going to have we're going to have wonderful parties from all walks of life, they're all going to do it. If we take everything he says, then it also stands for radicals. It also stands for people who are Nazis, racists, anti-LGBT. These people still get in. By his metric, they get in as much. We need the party system, because in the party system, this small discourse, these small people come in and they get booed out by the bigger parties and they get knocked out. And they actually have a discourse that doesn't get elected. Those radicals don't end up in a position where they're in the chamber being able to make real change. Either none of Cormac's points stand and they can't get into chamber, can't make change. I'll take you in 10 seconds. Or they can get in and they can actually damage democracy as radicals. Cormac, POI? Surely
the minority groups in that party that want to push things, such as the Democratic Socialists in the Democrat Party trying to push their Green New Deal, surely they have more leverage when they can guarantee a party voting for the opposition's bill if you vote for their bill, as opposed to the Republicans not knowing whether the Democrats will vote for their bill because the Democrats might just call a party whip.
Okay, one, party whips aren't always observed. Look at how many times people, even Blair with his fuck off majority, got opposed. That whips don't always work. Look at Labour now. And also, no, not really. They have that. Wait till the Democrats get in power. Wait until the Democrats are the main opposition. And then those people have real influence. It's not you were against us when we don't have power, so we're going to let you back and influence us when we're in government. That's just not how sensibility works. So no, that's not the case. They do not have more influence if they're on their own, also being useless. So we need to actually have party discourse, have these party conversations in order to prevent radicalization and prevent radicals getting into parliament. Here is the thing. Here is the counterfactual here. One, there are two counterfactuals here. One, everything Cormac has said is right. Everything Cormac has said is right, and he's giving me no reason not to think that the radicals get into power. Or two, as I've already pointed out, the electorates don't guarantee a moral vote. They don't guarantee electing sensible people. They don't guarantee electing people that we need. And when we get rid of catch-all parties, they're still going to vote for the centrists, and everyone else is just going to get booted out. I mean, those centrist parties still things. You can say we don't like catch-all parties, and maybe we go from a two-party system to a 3- or 4-party system. But that first and fourth party on either spectrum are still going to be disregarded by the other two. And it's more likely that the two centrist parties get out. If we have momentum, Blairites, Cameronites, and Thatcherites, Cameronites and Blairites have more in common. They're more likely to cause a joint government, whatever the fucking word is, than the extremes on either side. So yeah, that's why it is important. We need to protect morality, protect voices, and prevent radicalization. Done. That was a very butchered speech. I do apologize.
I would like to thank the Leader of the Opposition for a fine speech and welcome up the Deputy Prime Minister. Hear, hear.
I'm so not ready for this speech. I mean, I am, but like mentally not. I'm too tired.
Yeah,
Anyway.
me neither. Me neither, Balance.
I'm sorry, but I will try my best. So let me get my timer. Okay. Oh, wait, POIs from the chat. Okay, 3, 2, 1, go. So first of all, some short rebuttals. The opposition leader of the opposition member that radical parties will get into power or something like that. I would like to point out that most radical parties are actually often banned from getting into parliament. And then their main point was about securing voices. I think my partner already pointed out, but I would like to point out again that these minorities in parties actually often get pushed aside and silenced within their parties due to party leaders, party whips. Just look at what's happening in the US for the last 8 years. Most votes on legislation have been happening on party lines, like just the recent appointing of the new justice to the Supreme Court. And you want me to believe that every time these people vote the legislation, every single member of the party agree on the bill? No, it's their party leaders and the whips that actually often forces them to vote for the bills, even if they not actually want to. If we ban these catch-all parties, what we get is more parties with more streamlined ideologies and better debates about legislations. And actually their voices will be much more likely to be heard. And it will also much more likely to lead to cooperation between parties. And we have seen that currently the catch-all parties and two-party systems do not work. Also in the US, number of deadlocks have been happening in the last couple of years, which again shows how ineffective catch-all parties are. I would like to go on to my points. My partner already mentioned that if we ban catch-all parties, basically what we have is better scrutiny on bears, better discussion about the bears, which will also leads to better cooperation between parties, which will eventually lead to parties and governments passing the optimal bills. Like, for example, let's take, for example, the Green New Deal. The Democrats have been trying to pass it for years, but they haven't managed to. Why? Because there's obviously some issues with it. However, they cannot, they fail to see the issues with it because the party leaders just say that the rest of the members to just vote for it as it is. If we have multiple party system or more parties with more streamlined ideologies, now we have suddenly more cooperation between them, changing certain parts of the Green New Deal, so it's more optimal for everyone. Therefore, it is more likely to get passed. Now that this happens, now we have bills that actually lead to changes. That actually not just watered down forms of actually important bills. What we often see also with catch-all parties is that they basically capitalize on one single issue to gain vote and do not actually care about social change. They just, during elections time, they just say that this is one bad thing they will fight against. But when it actually comes to changing, they don't do anything. They just maybe introduce a watered down bill, as my partner have already mentioned. Now that we have proven that on our side, what we will have is bills being passed that actually will achieve social change or economic change. The impacts of this are clearly good, and we can quite clearly see them. Passing a bill such as the Green New Deal obviously will not save the environment in itself, but obviously improve climate change, address the issue of inequality. Furthermore, banning catch-all parties also leads to better representation for the people. Why? Because now you have people, because people tend to often vote based on they do what's so-called a tactical voting, by which they vote for parties that might not represent their ideologies the best. It's more likely to get into power and achieve some form of change. At least that's what the voter believes. But when you have more parties, when you don't have these catch-all parties, people suddenly find that there are parties that fully represent their ideas, their values, their ideologies, and therefore they're more likely to go and vote for that party because they think that they know that party will actually fight for their causes and not just maybe 2 or 3 issues that they share in common. They will actually fight for all the issues that they want. So suddenly people see that there's better parties that are more aligned with their own ideas and values. Therefore, they will more likely go out and vote. Therefore, also this leads to better representation of the general public and higher voter turnout in elections, which again improves the legitimacy of governments or bills being passed. Again, the Brexit that has been highly criticized because it's just being pushed through by one party. Within the party, there is obviously great divide on what it should actually contain, should have contained. So all of these issues on our side are removed now. While tactical voting that will not go away entirely, it is definitely reduced on our side. Also, this will also people now more likely to turn out on elections. This also requires them to also engage more in politics, in public discourse about politics, which again just leads to people being active more in politics, having more discussions, which is obviously good for everyone. Because also, I would like to just mention in rebuttal that I forgot that radical parties won't be able to hide behind catch-all parties anymore if we ban them. They will actually have to show their radical views and try and gain support like that, but that is not very likely because often they are very, very minority and will not actually get into parliament at all to have any influence on the bills. I think that's it. Wait, let me go over my notes. Yes. So basically what we have on our side is radicals won't be able to hide behind the catch-all parties, voices of minorities will actually be heard more. Social change and economic issues will be actually addressed properly and dealt with politics, because parties won't just capitalize on one issue to gain in power and then do nothing about it. Lastly, it will lead to better representation by parties, higher voter turnouts, which just leads to the strengthening of the democratic system that we live in, giving more legitimacy to government, and it also leads to, if the legitimacy of the government is increased, then there will be less division within society itself, because people won't be questioning whether, let's say, Trump is legitimate in winning the next election, did he sabotage it or not, etc. So these issues are removed on our side. So proud to propose. Thank you.
I would like to thank the Deputy Prime Minister for a wonderful speech and welcome up the Deputy Leader of the Opposition. Hear, hear.
Thank you. Okay, so I have two main points about why we should not end catch-all parties. The first point is that catch-all parties are going to be bigger, and that's why I'm going to explain why that's going to be better, and also that they're going to have a broader spectrum of ideologies, which has already been said, and why that is better. I'm going to include rebuttal during my speech because there's some direct clashes, especially the point about democracy. Actually, I'll start with that. Okay, so catch-all parties mean that normal people are more likely to get engaged in politics, and by normal people I mean the general public that don't study politics at university, don't necessarily have any links to politics in their family. These people would not keep up with all of the parties if we had loads of parties with very specific ideologies. People barely read party manifestos as it is with the number of parties that we currently have, and I really don't believe that people are going to read 20 manifestos to find this supposed party that perfectly represents their views, because honestly I just don't think the average member of the public cares that much or has that much free time to read this many manifestos and to get that involved in politics. So this is going to make ending catch-all parties less democratic than when we have them, because people will be less likely to vote because they're going to become disillusioned with politics. They're not going to care as much if we have all of these parties with very specific manifestos, and it's going to become the people that really care about politics are going to be the only ones that vote. And the idea of radical parties getting into power has already came up, but it is going to be the people that are radical that are going to be the ones that are actually voting, because other people are just going to give up. Basically, we're going to keep up with so many parties, especially with things like when the BBC does like debates with all the parties, and that would take so long, or there would have to be so many different debates if you're going to broadcast all of these parties, and people are not going to watch it, and honestly they just won't care. So catch-all parties are going to be bigger, and that's going to mean that there's a range of people from different backgrounds, because a lot of the time your background does influence your politics, and I think this is a good thing, because honestly it's quite dangerous to have people all only from one background that all agree with each other and have one idea of how the world should look in a party, and with no one else in that party to challenge them. Because that also leads to radicalization. So having a bigger party with a range of people from different backgrounds means that you get people in a party that have sympathy for all people in society, and that's going to lead to better policies for everyone in the country, rather than just a party that benefits a small number of people and a very specific group of people. A bigger party also means that a bigger party can still have individuals' views represented. You can still have policies that kind of range in ideology. It doesn't mean that every policy is going to be a centrist policy. It just means that not every policy is going to be far left, or not every policy is going to be far right, because different areas of public life might require different levels of being left-wing or being right-wing, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Yeah, so I kind of mentioned it already, but there's going to be more checks and balances in a bigger party. And this is because a broad spectrum of views among members acts as a check and balance, because lots of people agreeing on something is kind of dangerous. So if you're adhering to one specific ideology and you're not flexible, that's a problem if the situation changes, such as this is a pandemic, because that requires a change in how left. Yeah, okay, sorry, I've just seen it. Cormac, yeah, I'll take a POI.
Surely in a system where you have to appease the most amount of people possible and, like, you know, tiptoe not to ruffle any feathers, then major changes are less likely to happen.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a good thing because to me, the idea that the far right would be able to pass acts that they want is the worst thing that I can think of. I don't want radical acts to be passed. I think you're right, you get less far left progress as well, but I'm willing to compromise that for the idea that abortions can't be outlawed, like gay marriage can't be outlawed, things like this. Yeah, okay.
So the idea that far right parties would exist in a way that they wouldn't be catch-all means that, like, we actually have a massive amount of people that subscribe to, like, far right ideologies rather than being tricked by ideas like the Brexit Party, which is a catch-all party because it includes multiple things under the moniker of just a Brexit Party. Surely those far right parties are, like, going to be exposed for the disgusting views rather than, you know, be able to hide and masquerade behind catch-all parties.
Well, I think if you had a party that had chance of success, like if you had a party like UKIP, which had a chance of success because there's no catch-all parties, I think actually, unfortunately, a lot of people would vote for them. And rather than them being exposed for being wrong, they would actually get power because 2017, quite a lot of people voted for UKIP. So I think, unfortunately, they would actually get a lot of traction. Okay, so also politics should represent real life, and actually no, I'll finish my point about the pandemic. So I feel like if the Conservatives were not willing to compromise on being, if, for example, if they were still Thatcherites, if they were not willing to compromise on being far right, that we would never have had the furlough scheme, we would never have had any support for people in the pandemic. You have to be flexible because politics is real life. So being specific to one ideology is actually dangerous if the situation changes, like if there's suddenly a catastrophe or a pandemic or climate change, things like this. So you have to be flexible. Also, if all parties have a determined ideology, they won't be able to cooperate, and it's unlikely that one will have a majority because there'll be so many, so it'll just be chaotic. Life has a broad spectrum of people with different views, so parties should too, and cooperation between party members with different views is more likely than cooperation between parties that completely disagree. If you have people with different views in one party, they're more likely to find a solution and want to compromise with each other and cooperate than two separate parties with two separate views that they're not willing to compromise on. They're never going to cooperate, and that's going to result in a lack of policy change and a lack of helping people that could have been helped if they were just in the same party and wanted to compromise to actually pass policies. Thank you.
I would like to thank the Deputy Leader of the Opposition for a fine speech, and I would like to welcome up anybody from the audience who has a question to give either Gov or Op a question. If you are not comfortable with talking out loud, then feel free to type it and who it's directed to. But just unmute your mic and give us a question if you've got one.
Ben's got one.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Ben, do you want to say a question out loud?
Yes. This is for the opposition. Surely catch-all parties increase the likelihood of false promises being made to the public and increasing the disillusionment the public has with government in general.
Cool.
So do the whips answer these questions? Yeah. In this speech?
Can I also have questions, even though I'm a member?
Just the audience. You can ask POIs. but
Sorry,
you can't anymore.
my internet just crashed. Sorry about that.
Oh, can
Josh have separate instruments.
Ben, if I send you my question, can you ask it?
Go crazy.
It's not Hungary.
What does this have to do with me being from Hungary?
Corruption.
There's no rule stating I cannot do it. Where are you, Ben?
Georgia, are you timing for 5 minutes of questions?
I'll have to time from in here, so yeah. Oh, for 5 minutes of questions, yes. Yes. Yes.
So I have another question that's just come to me. Would you not agree that people have become disincentives from following politics and reading party manifestos because of their constant disappointment with catch-all parties not addressing issues properly?
I have a question. Do me and Liv both have to answer them, or is it more catered to one person or the other? Because I know that Ben's first one was like to Liv.
It would help us if we both did whatever's relevant to our side.
So both of those are more relevant to you.
Yeah, but you can talk about them if you want. You can shit on me with them.
I was thinking that. Ben, will you repeat your second question, please?
Would you not agree that people have become disincentive from following politics and reading party manifestos because of their constant disappointment with catch-all parties not addressing issues properly?
What's up, Josh? Why the angry face?
I have a question for Josh in general. Why has he got a monocle on?
Halloween costume.
Any questions directed at GovBench?
No, because we were perfect. Our case stands properly.
Well, I'm not going to give a question because I'm the chair.
I mean, if you let me ask a question.
You can't ask the question. Audience?
You can always text it to Ben.
Don't be, well, you can. Don't be shy. Any question will do, even if it sounds...
But also, Josh, your question better not be like really shit.
Also, like, even if it's something you don't understand and you want a clarification, that's the sort of question you can
I have
ask.
a question for GovBench.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Cool. From your own framing, catch-all parties often address a specific issue that they care about. Due to people's nature of caring about more than one issue, how do like specific parties campaigning on issues like the environment or whatever encompass a range of issues where people don't feel they have to compromise on other things that they care about? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for that lovely question. Hello, Joshua Graham has sent a question. Thank you.
Read it out loud, Georgia.
Can catch-all parties, which are complicit in political corruption, be capable of solving the climate crisis enabled by dark money and corporate monopolies' interference in politics? That's a fantastic question.
Can you get your point, come on.
I have another question.
Is this from Josh?
This is definitely
Unrelated, I'm going to put on a posh voice. Given that popular support for the death penalty, should this be allowed? Are there lots some popular things that should not be implemented?
What?
I'll be honest, it's not my best
Who's that
question.
for?
Love, I assume.
Yeah,
That was meant as a not a lot.
So was that just like, should all popular views be like implemented? Was that basically
like the death penalty?
Can I have the time of that?
Reading.
And it just happens we're on 5 minutes.
No, we've got about 10 seconds left. Just
You were
in case
late
anybody...
in here.
Yeah, I was like a minute and a half. That means we've got now about 1 second left. Okay, cool, wonderful. So thank you for the questions, audience. You've been wonderful. What do you do?
Just stay here and use that one.
Okay, but I need a timer. I don't have my phone on me.
We had a question come in just before the timer went out
I would
on the
like.
chat.
Oh, wonderful. One last question. We'll just add this in. Might be similar to Laura's point, but would people not be divided between
that's basically the same.
different things they care about? But still, yeah, still a good question. Okay, so now the whips have 4 minutes.
So we have to do all these questions and like
whatever you think is relevant. Anyway, I'm going before you so you can see what I do.
Yeah.
Okay, I would like to welcome up the opposition whip. Here.
Okay. Right, so I'm with Josh and Jasmine, just so everyone knows, because like the switch of the whips and all that. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Okay, before I go into my speech, I'm going to answer a few of your questions, then summarize this debate comparatively and tell you why now we win. So the first question we got was like, do catch-all parties provide false promises and disillusionment? Right. I say whatever you think, whatever the analysis of this debate shows, disillusionment of a small number of voters is far, far better than the oppression of a number of different minorities, which has been addressed in Jasmine's speech and I'll go into further in my speech. Second of all, the reading of manifestos, right? You can claim whatever the hell you like, but as a student, I know that I would much rather read 2 manifestos than 40. People are lazy, people are busy, people have to go to work, people have to look after their kids. They are going to be more disillusioned by the concept of having to read 40 different manifestos before they're allowed to have an opinion on something. And finally, the point on like corrupt politics, right? You've met politicians, or maybe you haven't, but you've heard of them, right? They're all fucking corrupt in every party. Even the good parties have corrupt, shady politicians, right? I think this is a wash on both sides. Okay, so the debate today, right? I think it's important that we need to talk about what we are facing in the current political climate and how this is relevant to it. So we're facing party polarization and populism. We're facing crises like COVID, which are almost completely unforeseen. We're facing things like leaving the EU, facing the refugee crisis. Do we know where people are going? How do we deal with them and who they are? Right. So in order to solve this, I'm going to explain to you again what catch-all parties are and the points we bring with catch-all parties and why we solve those things. Right, so catch-all party, a party that encourages a broad spectrum of views among its members. Its opposite on the Gov side is when a party defends one policy, recruits people to that policy, and seeks people specifically who support that policy. Such is this way that those parties are small. Rather than dividing between power, you get these tiny, tiny fringe parties that tend to be extreme communists or Brexit voters, you know, that kind of thing, dedicated to one single view, which does not help to show the nuance of politics, right? So some of our points in this debate, right? These effects achieve the goals I've said in the present political crisis. So you've seen us talk about how you have a check and balance within the party. You've seen us talk about how we can adapt to unforeseen situations with a range of views, how we have inter-party cooperation and compromise, how we engage with people better in politics, and how we support minorities. But I think one of the standout points we bring more than any others is that racist parties under our side of the house don't get into majority power, because if more racists voted UKIP instead of Conservative or Labour, UKIP would have gained more power. Like Jasmine said, on our side, we draw those voters into central parties as well as adhere voters and get less racists into power. So what do we get on the government side, right? So the main part of government's case is like they keep bringing up this issue of the party whip, right? Assuming we believe them on this, here is still the delta we see. So on our side, you get a large party with broad views that discusses and compromises and then comes up with an opinion that the party whip pushes. If the opinion it asks people to toe is a central line, and the exception of those who do not toe that line are the ones who push people to vote for things on moral grounds. On their side of the house, you get small, more extreme parties that have no internal check and balance. There's no people there to make sure that the view they're putting forth is central and not extreme. And the extreme things I'm talking about are things like kill all immigrants, put the death penalty for us, this kind of thing. These are the things that can get into the power. Their side, furthermore, their side still has an ideological whip, except this time they are whipping people who are not schooled in politics. They are whipping the public, not the party. And we think this is much worse because you can get people who aren't educated being whipped to get rid of to repress minorities. So what's the comparative in this debate? They have a small chance of slightly less extremists in power. We have a genuine mech for keeping racists away from direct decision making. They have views that are maybe slightly better represented, but people are multifaceted with many views that can't be represented to one single view, even if we assume they can be asked to read all the manifestos. And we have catch-all parties with a broad range of views that engage far more people into politics. Thank you, we win.
I'd like to thank the opposition whip for a fine speech and welcome up the Gov whip to conclude the debate as a whole. Hear, hear.
Okay, so first, I might incorporate some of the questions within my speech, but first I'm just going to go over why everything Liv said is wrong and actually comes against their complete case. So the most important thing that Liv said, which is completely wrong for their side, is that on catch-all parties, it stops racist parties from getting into power. However, within the status quo, we've seen in the UK and the US that this is not true. Boris Johnson and Donald Trump are both racist. The comments that have been made by both sides proves that. And if they can get into power under catch-all parties, then surely Liv's whole case, as she's just said, is wrong. And then going over other stuff that got said that I disagree with. Josh was saying that like voices are secured within catch parties and people aren't elected within the system. But what am I trying to say? But we were saying that if MPs are elected by the electorate, it doesn't prove that minority voices are secured. And often we see that minorities within like bigger parties are squashed, especially by party whips, because if they don't vote in line, they lose like their positions within cabinets and stuff. So obviously they're not going to be willing to risk it based on like what constituents and people believe, whereas we think that people in our side would get greater representation because they have they have more people that encompass their view and they know that they'll be like followed. Also with what Jasmine was saying, when she was saying like with BBC debates, if you had more parties under a multi-party system, this wouldn't work. Well, you're just talking about what you see in the status quo. Obviously, if you had multi-parties, the debates and things would be run differently. And so that doesn't really matter. Like there'd be a way that's done. It manages to work in Europe and other places in the world. So that's not an issue. You also say that with bigger parties, you've got greater backgrounds and representation. This isn't true. Like when you look at the Conservative Party, there's a very small amount of minorities and they are hardly represented, especially like they are very much just passing things that fit one small side, and the cabinet and a lot of people are very much whitewashed, and the minorities they do have are just to tick a box. It's not actually helping anything at all. You say it's better policies for more people. Again, it's not what we see in the status quo. At least we can say that if we've got more parties that will work together with cooperation and it's more like to be a coalition, we know that more things like more issues will be solved. And also when the other side said that with us, and Liv said that she tried to define what we said wrong. She said that we'd just be focusing on one sole issue. We didn't say that. We said within an ideology, it would encompass multiple issues. Like Cormac and Ballant both said that. So you took what we said out of context and that's not true. Also, when you're saying that it would be harder for people to work in a crisis, like with a pandemic and stuff, we've seen that in Europe, people have negotiated and worked together to come through this. So again, like that, what you said, like doesn't really happen. And like, we can say that cooperation would happen between us. And you're saying that like bigger parties reflect a broader spectrum and you're more likely for like cooperation and things like that. But again, like that isn't true. It's very much just very polar. And again, like especially like in the US with a lot of, you just get gridlock with a lot of policies. So at least we know that on our side we would get greater cooperation. I don't know how many minutes it's been. So yeah, we think that we're better because we have greater representation for minorities. We've got better scrutiny and better discussion on bills. We do believe, as Ballant said, that minority parties, that radical views wouldn't be represented because those parties wouldn't have like what it's needed to be like voted. Well, they wouldn't they wouldn't have, I can't remember the word. Like they wouldn't have like the accreditation to be put within that, so that removes the risk of radical parties. But yeah, we'd have like better representation, and we think that because the status quo is failing, that we have a lot more things that are likely to occur than what we've seen.